All right. The next segment that we're going to be doing this evening is I'm not happy. And that has to do with unmet expectations. This is probably the first and only time you'll ever see me read this evening, but it's fairly long, and I wanted to share this quote with you. How often have you thought you were clear in expressing an expectation or need only to find, to your frustration, that your expectations have been forgotten, dismissed, ignored, or outright defied? Have any of you been in a relationship? Any of you trying to raise children? So we've basically all been here. Immediately, you find your blood pressure up and your reactive, defensive, venting language engaged as you begin to tell subordinates, coworkers, and third parties of your right to the expectations you have and the wrong that has been perpetrated in ignoring, refusing, or otherwise denying your expectations. You may recognize situational stress arising from the difference between your assumptions and theirs. It pays to recognize that you are probably not the only one in the situation with a stress issue. When we have expectations, a whole bag of assumptions tend to follow along. In an emotionally intelligent workplace, we may spend time identifying and clarifying expectations, as well as confirming our expectations that they have been heard and that they are capable of being met. We may also get to the point where we are certain much of this cognitively taxing work is no longer necessary. It's too time-consuming, or should in effect be a no-brainer. At this point, we trade emotionally intelligent practices for expedience. How many of you have had experiences with unmet expectations? There's just not enough time tonight, is there, to go over those? And what I have found to be consistently true is an unmet expectation is the garden for stress and conflict at home and at work. You should just know. If you cared about me at all, you would know what I expect. How many of you, before you got into a long-term relationship, sat down with that person and said, now this is what I expect? None of us have done that, right? How many of you have sat down with your staff and told them what you expect? Because if you haven't, how will they know that they're being successful? Either yourself or as an employer. Have any of you gone through performance evaluations where you get called into the boss's office and they tell you what you've been doing right and what you've been doing wrong for the last 12 months? You don't even remember doing it. Right? Let alone whether it was right or wrong. Unmet expectations. How many of you who are business owners have expectations of your businesses? Have you ever thought about that? Because we all do. It might be financial, it might be emotional, but we all have expectations of our business. What became very clear to me, especially when I took not all of these segments we've talked about in isolation, but I started to blend them and integrate them. What priority is my business? What number? 3. How many of you think that I had level 3 expectations of my business?
No.
What expectation level did I have? 1. Now, was that fair to me or my business? Because it cannot deliver number 1 expectations when it's the 3rd most important thing in my life. It was unfair to expect that of my business. So I had to retweak my model. I just charge more now. It worked out beautifully. I wish. But the same is true. If you have a business and you don't know what you expect from it in terms of lifestyle, this is the most freeing and liberating thing I might say tonight to you tonight. You own your business. Your business does not own you. And it might be because you have assumed the expectations of your business and you've never articulated it. We also do that with the people in our lives, don't we? They should just know how to treat us. They should know what we want out of a relationship. And yet, how many of you passed Mind Reading 101? I have personally personally been unsuccessful guessing what somebody else wants from me. How will I know? If they tell you, or if I ask. And if I ask, what do I need to do?
Listen.
Because sometimes they'll tell you things you don't want to hear. The book that I'm reading that I spoke to you about a few minutes ago, The Secret Code to Success, one of the systems that you have to evaluate are your people systems. You have to ask the people in your world some very significant questions. One of them is, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you place our relationship? And if it's not a 10, your next question is, what can I do to make it a 10? Now we know the expectation. Can everybody meet our expectations? No. And it's unfair for us to assume that. Remember how dangerous assumptions work? And even just this quote from earlier. We can't assume that everyone is capable of meeting our expectations. So in some cases, we may need to lower our expectations if that relationship is very valuable to us. In other cases, we don't want to sacrifice the relationship. We don't want to lower our standards. So we have to provide something to that other individual. Maybe it's an additional skill set. Maybe it's more face time. Maybe it's whatever. But you have to ask the question and then set that expectation. Because when our expectations aren't met and we're experiencing stress and conflict, what happens to our bodies when we are in stressful situations or in conflict? Heart attack. What else?
High blood pressure.
High blood pressure. Coughing. Excellent. Ulcers, infections, right? Stress and conflict have an effect on our bodies. And sustained stress for long periods of time, it has been correlated to some forms of cancer. It's just not worth it. And you know what is so wonderful? We all have it in our power to share our expectations and let people know. Now, in the coaching world, it's called charge neutral. That means there is no emotional content when we ask people for what we want. It simply is what it is. Now, if I was to say, oh, honey, I would really like to spend more time with you, that's fairly neutral, a little suck-up-ish, but mostly neutral. However, if I was to say, hey, I want more time and I want it now, the delivery is a little different of that expectation, not charge neutral, right? Because it's not what we say to people that they remember, but it's how we say it. And when we're sharing our expectations with others, whether personally or professionally, how we choose to deliver that expectation is very, very important. Any questions on unmet expectations? Do you have any? Are you going to take some action? Again, this is one of those segments that I'm just making you dangerous. Yes, I'm going to go share all my unmet expectations tonight. Don't call me at midnight when you need a place to stay. Okay? Common sense with everything I'm sharing with you tonight. If it doesn't make sense, don't do it. I heard a speaker not too long ago that said you get a lot of information from a lot of gurus, subject matter experts, consultants, and if we did everything that everybody told us, we'd be running around in circles and not doing anything that made any sense. So whether here tonight or any other consultant or any other professional that you work with or talk to or listen to, take under advisement and then apply only those things which make sense for your personal and professional situation.